All the way from the start, I can feel it in my heart, like all the way from the start.
Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today I've got a new tutorial where we're going to talk about mixing in mono in 2019 and beyond. I want to first show you how to set up a mono referencing environment in your DAW. How often should you do it? Is it that important? Why should you do it? What are some considerations in terms of mixing in mono? So first of all, how do you set up an environment that you can mix in mono? For me, I have an RME interface and I have this little remote here with these macro controls, and I can just click this button and it will make all of the sound coming through my outputs mono. So I can just click that and I'm mixing in mono. If you don't have that, it's no problem. It's really easy to set this up. You just need a plugin that has a mono switch, something that's going to switch whatever signal's coming through it into mono, and then leave everything else untouched. But I'm using the gain plugin in Logic Pro X. So depending on what DAW you have, I'm sure you can find a utility like this, but you're going to place this as the last plugin in your chain on the stereo bus. And then you can just simply flick the mono switch. And again, that's all the output is going to be monitored in mono, and you can just flick it on and off throughout the mixing process. So easy to set up. Now, why would you want to mix in mono? There's a lot of different considerations here. But first of all, I just want to kind of speak to maybe a little bit of a misconception out here that people are mixing in mono primarily. So people have been stressing the importance of mixing and referencing in mono, but people are not mixing in mono completely. As if you're an engineer, that would be pretty crazy, because 95% of your listeners are in stereo. Keep in mind that this is a utility. It's meant to be something that will help you in the mixing process, but we're not aiming to create a mono mix unless, for a very, very small micro percentage of projects that maybe you're doing something completely in mono. But for those of you who are musicians, artists, songwriters, that's not usually going to be the case. Almost always not going to be the case. So with that said, how does monitoring and mixing in mono really help in the process? Well, first of all, let me play back this idea. This is just something I was recording. I'm going to keep it in stereo right now. I've got quite a bit of stereo information, some spreading going on. I've got a wide stereo reverb. I've got a wide delay, and some other things on the stereo bus. We're going to talk about those individually, but I'm going to flick it into mono, and I want you to, one, keep an eye over here on this phase correlation meter, and this correlation will show us, if we're in the green, that means that our phase relationship is well balanced, versus if we go to the left, that's going to be more of a problem. So keep an eye on that, and then just listen to the way, number one, the balance is affected in terms of just the blending of the tracks. And then also the effects, listen to how those change, because again, those are stereo right now. Here we go.
Your bad moves getting more frequent. The dude dropped the ball, he out of sequence. Don't know why you wasting time. Intentions ain't pure like mine. Know the game, but I ain't here to play you. Players run the score up, that's what they do. I'm a different breed, look deep into my eyes. Keep you safe and I'ma shield you from the lies.
All right, so there's a couple things you're gonna notice. Number one, you could see my correlation here on our meter was good. We were in the green. And when I flicked into mono, the vocal still was very upfront, still very present. We didn't lose any of the other instrumentation in the background. Nothing was affected in a really negative way where we could hear kind of a phase issue happening. A couple of ways to identify that. One would be, if you have a track completely disappear, then that means, if you go into mono and it completely disappears, then that means you've got a problem, a phase issue that you're going to have to fix. But otherwise, we're just looking for the general relationship and the feel of the balance of the mix to stay the same when we go to mono. Now, the other thing that you heard is how drastically different the reverb and the delay on that vocal sounded once I went into mono. So let me solo that just so you can get a little bit clearer perspective. Let's first play it back with these in stereo, and I'm going to flick it into mono, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Your bad moves getting more frequent. The dude dropped the ball, he out of sequence. Don't know why you wasting time. Intentions ain't pure like mine, oh. Know the game, but I ain't here to play, oh. Players run the score up, that's what they do.
Okay, so for this vocal specifically, my consideration was, okay, I've got one layer and I want to make this vocal more exciting on the outside lanes, if you will. I want to give it more of a swimmy, 3D sort of effect because we don't have that much instrumentation going on. So that's why we have that stereo reverb and delay. But you notice that when we went into mono, once we got it to be more narrow, those effects are sitting in the same lane, if you will, as our main vocal line. So they're more prominent. And I thought they are a little bit distracting as well. So I want to, again, have these effects be something that's just kind of ear candy, but not taking away from the main vocal. So that's a consideration in terms of, when you choose a stereo reverb, a stereo delay, versus a mono reverb or mono delay. For the sake of example, I want to show you how we can identify a problem, say with the bass line, because the bass, a lot of you out there, this is where you start having some issues in terms of your phase correlation and phase relationship. So this bass line, let me just, for example, some of you get crazy with delay and you want to make these bass lines really wide. So let me just power this on and take a listen here.
Your bad moves getting more frequent. The dude dropped the ball, yeah.
All right, so with that on there in stereo, it sounds cooler, right? It's wide, pretty nice. Now, let's go and let's flick it into mono. Watch what happens. We lost a tremendous amount of impact from the bass line just by introducing this delay here that sounds cool in stereo and it gives us more width. But once we go into mono, we can see that we suck some life out of that. So that's just one example. And again, the bass lines are usually these days where a lot of our issues are starting to happen in terms of using a lot of stereo effects, a lot of stereo information. So just something to consider. I ended up using Stereo Delta, which gives you, a spatial processing for a 3D wider effect, but this is mono compatible. So if I turn this on, we get the wideness, but now when we go into mono, nothing's changing, which means that we're not introducing, any phase or any kind of problems there. One of the most important things about mixing in mono is that you can really get a better sort of idea of the just overall essential blend of your mix. So a lot of times if you're just trying to level out a kick, a snare, the vocal, once we go into mono, you're going to notice that things are just perceived differently. If you've got all these stereo effects going on, it has the more 3D sort of sound to it. You don't pick up on the subtleties of just the pure levels and balance. So a lot of time just going into mono and, going in and making some changes to your mixer, individual tracks, it's just more accurate to do it that way. Bass lines, usually I want the core of the bass sound to be down the middle. And then I've shown some tricks in some other videos of adding stereo information to the higher frequencies of your bass line so that you're still retaining that mono compatibility and that mono presence or impact like we just heard, but we're adding some more excitement to it. Be very careful about how you're using, stereo imaging on the master. The less of a dramatic change from stereo to mono, the better. All right, y'all. So we talked briefly about how to reference and monitor in mono, why you would want to do it, how important is it? And really what it's most useful for. We're using mono referencing as a utility to, just kind of keep us in check throughout the mixing process. It's very helpful to get your essential balances, your essential levels down. It's also really useful to figure out, how to kind of choose what you want to be wide versus what you want to be narrow. If everything in the mix is wide, you're going to have a less focused mix. You're going to lose some of the impact of it, especially with drum sounds, vocals, things that you want to be very focused, very narrow, more mono, down the middle type of stuff. So it can help you make those considerations It also will let you hear what's changing in terms of your effects. If you're using stereo effects, they're going to change quite dramatically once you go into mono. Obviously, we don't want things to disappear. We don't want the core leveling to change, and we still want it to sound balanced. That's the key to mixing and referencing in mono. All right, y'all. So if you have any questions about mixing in mono in 2019 and beyond, feel free to leave a comment below. If you learned anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing. We'll talk to you soon.